to the Integrate This EdTech podcast. I'm Jeremy Mikla, and I'm joined here, as always, by co-host David Berner. And David and I are fortunate enough to have a wonderful guest join us here today. We're really thankful that you're able to be on the show with us. And we have Stephanie Howell. And Stephanie here, kind of as we kick things off, why don't you kind of give us a little bit of background, a little bit of information about, like who you are, how did you get to this point in your edtech and tech and education journey?
Yeah, so I actually did not want to be an educator. I actually hated school as a student. And so when I was in the second grade, I was diagnosed with a learning disability. School was extremely hard for me, especially like reading and writing. And the way that I was taught was not something that I enjoyed. A lot of my learning was direct instructions, sitting in rows, and the teacher was teaching. I had to take notes, and it just wasn't engaging. I am the like hands-on active learner, and just being that passive learner was just something that I was not excited about. So I'm like, okay, I can't wait to graduate. I can't wait to, get into the real world. And then high school came, and I started to be a peer model in a classroom with students that had more severe disabilities, maybe physical, like wheelchairs, or even just some type of like autism. And with these students, I fell in love with supporting and helping them learn. And so I was like, oh no, I'm going in to be an educator. And so I was kind of put into that path and went to college and just didn't love my experience in college. And so I went online at Western Governors University, and I absolutely love the program. They have mastery based learning, and it was very one on one where I would meet with my mentor, meet with my professors. And it was just a whole different learning experience than I ever experienced in my entire career. So, being from that passive learner sitting in rows, expected to take notes, take a test on Friday, to project based learning and meeting with a mentor or meeting with a professor one on one and having conversations was something that I was like, oh, this can be learning, right? Like it just completely flipped. And so I continued my career and getting my special education license, and I found a job in Pickerington, Ohio, and I started to think about how can I create this learning experience for my students that are fifth graders to really enjoy learning, because I didn't in fifth grade, right? Like I absolutely hated learning. And so I really challenged the way that some of my teachers viewed learning. This thing called Google Classroom, I don't know if you guys know what that is, but came out in 2014. It was the first year, and I remember implementing it in my classroom. I was helping students with their writing, and I just gravitated towards technology because it allowed me not to be right next to my kids and giving them feedback and giving them support and seeing how they were doing. And that independence was not something that I had, right? Like I always had the teacher right next to me, and I felt like, oh my gosh, everyone knows how stupid I am right now. Like everyone knows I don't understand it because I have my intervention specialist sitting right next to me in my class, or these type of things. And so I was able to give that feedback to my students in a whole nother way and use some of that mastery based learning that I learned at Western Governors University to really empower my students and to begin to model to like my co-teachers, which then led me into instructional coaching, which led me into being a technology coordinator, teaching and learning coordinator, and now I work at SchoolAI. So that's kind of my journey. Is started out rough, but really started to transform the way that my students learned as well.
Yeah, and that David and I, we've had guests on the show, and they talk about some of the reasons why they first got into education, and it was because they were good at playing the game of school, right? And
Yeah.
they excelled, and to some extent, I would say this is true for me as well. School came, especially through high school, came fairly easy for me. It felt like I was getting good grades. I was doing the things that the teachers expected, and I was rewarded with getting my diploma at the end. And that is absolutely not the case for everyone. And I think it's really great then to hear voices like yours to amplify the experiences of others in the classroom. So was it Google Classroom that kind of was your foray then into the educational technology space, and you were just able to like accelerate from there and find more and more creative ways to use technology to help accommodate the learning needs of your students?
Yeah, it was Google Classroom. We had a set of iPads that we had to share between 5 classrooms. I hogged them because nobody else wanted to use them. So I'm like, okay, I'll use them, you know. But what I loved about Google Classroom is I could give my students choices. So they could choose which writing prompt they wanted to write with. We also used some of the dictation tools. So if they struggled with getting their words by typing, they could actually say their thoughts and ideas and then go in and kind of work through rewriting them. So we did a lot of fun kind of projects like that. Again, it was geared towards my writing, and I was a little afraid, like, okay, if we use too much of this, right, like they're gonna lose that magic. And so I was like, nope, just once a week on Fridays, we're using the iPads like as that motivator, as that carrot. And then soon I realized that there's other tools out there, and I think edtech was growing at that time, right? Like this is right at the
Mhm.
beginning of edtech kind of blooming before COVID, right? Like a lot of startup companies. I mean, I remember using Edpuzzle, Cami when they first were out there, and thinking, oh my gosh, this is insane the way that we can transform education.
Yeah, and, what has happened since, like, the time you talked about 2014 is, education technology keeps emerging, right? But what the platforms and the tools sometimes change. But I think one thing that I have noticed is what doesn't seem to change is there's always a group, a subset of educators who are reluctant to adapt to and embrace that next segment of change that's coming, right? It's iPads at one point, it's LMS capabilities, whether it's with Google Classroom or any of the others, and even emerging into today, it's definitely generative AI. But I still notice there's the same like group of teachers that don't want to embrace it, when it can be used to help accelerate the learning that is taking place for a student, how do you try to approach a teacher and say, I know this isn't your forte, this isn't your cup of tea, but if you embrace this, that could really help this segment of students in your classroom that are kind of being left, by the wayside. How do you try to connect that to teachers?
Yeah, I've dealt with a lot of those teachers. And I think my secret sauce is letting them vent. And there's like research back of like creating that psychological safe space first. So letting teachers really kind of share, hey, here is where I'm struggling in my classroom. This is why I don't want to use that technology tool that you're trying to get me to use. Like really allowing that time for them to share why they don't want to use whatever it is or what they're even scared of. And so building that relationship, creating that space for them to really share, like maybe it's time, maybe they're afraid they're going to have tech issues, maybe they're afraid students are going to misbehave. Whatever that root cause of them not using it, giving them that time to share and asking those questions if you need to maybe dive a little deeper on that teacher that's not as willing to share, and building that relationship. And then once they share, don't judge them for it, kind of be like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, I can totally see where your students might act up, or I totally see this. And then I would often offer to come in and support. So I would say, okay, I see that. Can I come in? You'll lead the lesson and I'll be there as tech support. So if a student gets behind or scared, and if they get off task, I will be there to put them back on, right? And so being there as that extra hand the first few times is where I've seen teachers overcome, but really allowing and not judging them of like, come on, you've got to be using this. This is 2026. Why are we still not using our learning management system or whatever? That's going to really off put them. And so it's building that relationship, creating that safe space where they're willing to try new tools with you. And then also being there. And I mean, I've been in classrooms where I'll show up because I thought we had a same time. I made a Google Calendar invite, so that means it's happening, right? I show up in the classroom and the teacher's like, "Oh, we're not doing that today." And I'm like, "But But I, right, like stop being selfish. And it's like, okay, well then can I come back next Thursday? Can I come back later this afternoon? Can I come back here? And I think that constant, like, I am not leaving. I'm going to be here to support you has really shown some of those teachers that have been a little bit more hesitant that I am there to support them. And I'm there to listen too. Like I'm there to listen to your problems, your pain points, and we're going to solve them together.
Yeah, and Stephanie, I think that's there's a lot of good tips you just gave there as far as like helping encourage teachers so that they don't maybe feel like they're on an island. And one of my questions is, and we kind of hear this a lot, is like, what do you do about the closed doors? Like, what's the approach for the closed door teachers? Is it like sending out a survey to see who's interested in some coaching? Maybe that still doesn't open the door. What have you seen, or maybe what have you tried to like try to open some of those doors for those teachers?
To open those doors, so this is kind of like funny because I don't think you're meaning physical doors, but middle school is where I kind of started coaching. And a lot of those teachers would either have the doors open or they would be shut. Like you have your open classrooms and you have the door shut classrooms as you're walking through the halls as a coach. And so the open doors, I feel like those teachers are willing to get feedback. They're willing to innovate. They're like, okay, come on in. And so I would do like morning rounds where I would, and they might not be morning, I just use the like doctor term, where I would go from classroom to classroom. When I entered a building, I had 3 buildings when I first started coaching, and I would just stop in. And at the beginning of me doing that, teachers were like, what do you need? And I'm like, nothing. I'm just here. I'm just here to see what the kids are doing. Right. But they're like, what do you need? And then like later that year, I actually needed something. And I'm like, I really need you. And they would ignore me because they thought I was just there to be in the classroom. And I'm like, no, I really have a question. Like, I really do need you right now. And they would just keep like, circling away from me. And I'm like, okay, now they're used to me coming in. But then you would have rooms where the doors are shut and it's kind of like awkward, right? Like when we think about that physical door, if it's open, I feel like I can just walk right in, quietly see what the kids are doing, walk out. But the doors that are shut, it sometimes feels like that's a blocker. It's like that noise of you opening and it creaking open, or you're walking in and all the kids are looking at you as you're walking in, like they can see you walking in. And so a lot of times with those teachers, right, it's again, building those relationships. Sometimes I would sit down with those teachers, figure out when their lunch is. I guess I'm like a high stalker, apparently, but I would like find out like what is their schedule, looking at the master schedule. Okay, I'm going to eat lunch here and just build that relationship. I'm going to listen. I'm going to see what is going on. Is there something I can help with? Is there a way that I can support them? I'm also really big into personality tests. So when it comes to personality, I did this wrong, right? Like we've got teachers that need me to check in with them, see how they're doing, see how their kids are. I am not like that. I am the to-do list person. I'm like, all right, let's get recording. Here's my to-do list. Let's get it done. Checked off the list. That's what motivates me. But I would notice that there's teachers that I'd be like, okay, let's get this done. And I didn't even ask them how they were. And so that right there was a relationship blocker. And so rather than just being like, hey, how's it going today? Or, hey, I know you had surgery last week. How did your mom's surgery go? Or how did your son's soccer game go this weekend? And so instead of doing that, I would just jump into the task. And so I realized I needed to slow down for some of those teachers that really needed me to check in with them. And then I got placed at the junior high. I say I got placed because it was not my choice. I was like, I love the 5th and 6th grade. Now you're moving me to 7th and 8th grade teachers. What, right? Like those secondary teachers, they have this like sometimes stigma. And these teachers would lock their doors. So in the middle school, I could just open it, right? Have that awkward creak, have that awkward moment of everyone staring at me. In the junior high, I had to get out my key and I had to like open and unlock the door to get into some of these classrooms, or knock on the door if I didn't have my keys on me. And they were always like, oh, it's for safety reasons that our doors are locked. And I'm like, but I really think they were trying to keep people out, right? Like, I really feel like they were sometimes keeping people out. And so with those type of teachers, again, it was that relationship building and really getting to know them. It does take time. And I think also like word of mouth. Like I would do something with one teacher that started to trust me, and then she would share with her TBT, her teacher-based team, hey, Stephanie did this activity with me. And then they would be like, hey, can you share that with me? Can Stephanie come in and try that with me? And we started to build. So word of mouth, and also just time of building relationships.
Yeah, and as you started to kind of work, and I really like your example of like you're approaching those teachers that are willing to work with you, and the word of mouth kind of gets out. They're really interesting things that other teachers are doing and that you're helping with and all of that. How do you know when a teacher, or how did you start to develop knowing what a teacher needed? Like in terms of, did they just need a resource? Did they want to do some co-teaching? Did they want to do, or, did they need modeling of how to use something in the classroom? Say it's whatever tool, or just like someone to listen to. How did you determine that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think for that, I use the Google coaching model when I use coaching. So that is where you start with a problem. So really focused on kind of that, what is the problem that this teacher is focusing in on? And I did this wrong. I never knew this framework when I first started coaching. It was kind of like, oh, just try things and see what sticks. I didn't really know. And then I started to learn about Jim Knight and Aguilera and, this Google coaching model. And so when I first started coaching, I was kind of like, here is everything. Here's all the tech tools. Here's all the resources. And I wasn't aligning it to what they actually needed or the curriculum or the goals. I was just like, let's try this sparkly thing right here. Let's try this, right? And so I did it wrong. I would say my first few years of coaching and figuring it out. And then I got introduced to the Google coaching model where you start with a problem. And so now with AI, I'm able to create a space where students or teachers are your students, they can join a space. And I'll first kind of start. So for example, one of the things that we were working on was executive functioning. A lot of teachers were struggling with classroom management because we were moving towards personalized learning. Well, when you have your students sitting in desks and rows and you're moving to that personalized learning, that can be sometimes a struggle for teachers. Now you've got active learners. Sometimes you feel like you care more than the kids because you're like, get your work done. And they're just sitting there, right? I had students that would say they're watching a video and the headphones weren't even in and the video was on silent. There was so many issues when we were trying to move to personalized learning. And so teachers were resistant. They didn't want to do it. And so what I did is I had this spreadsheet of 100 slides of resources. I overwhelmed a lot of teachers with those slides, right? And so what I started to do with that Google coaching model is I created a SchoolAI space. I uploaded those slides as resources. And I started with, okay, what is a problem? I want you to just think of one kid, right? Instead of thinking of all 30 kids, think of one kid. So I wanted them to think of one word, and I wanted them, it was kind of a fixed mindset activity at the start. So one of the words in the space was lazy, stubborn, messy, disruptive, right? Like some of these hard words. So I want you to think about yourself. Okay. What word would you give yourself, Jeremy and David? Are you messy? Are you lazy? Are you stubborn?
For me, it would be impatient.
Impatient. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. What about you, David?
Maybe too, I don't know if strict is the word, but I feel like I'm very much task at hand. I need to finish the thing at hand. I don't know.
Okay. You're probably a little stubborn then, right?
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
Yeah, because you can't get over it. So I'd ask these teachers, what is your word? Forgetful, unmotivated. They would pick a student. Typically, we usually don't focus on ourselves. So they would pick their word. And then what would happen is that word is aligned with an executive functioning skill. So when I think of impatient, I'm like, oh, Jeremy's always impatient. That's never going to change, right? But when I pair that up with an executive functioning skill, I think of skill. That's something that we can work on, right? And so I would hear these words in the lunchroom. I would hear them as I'm walking or in teacher planning meetings. And, they would say like, oh my gosh, this kid is so lazy. This kid is so stubborn. And so for my son, he's a 6-year-old. So he's in kindergarten and he's very stubborn. I'm like, that's who he is. And so he struggled with going to school this year. And so, I'm like, okay, I can either view this as stubborn or I can view this as he needs to work on cognitive flexibility. If I view it as cognitive flexibility, it's viewed as like growth mindset. And that's where I'm able to really dive into strategies that can support him and have him improve. And so we started to create this space. So instead of giving my teachers 100 resources on executive functioning strategies, they now went into the space. They shared the student's stubborn, the student's impatient, the student is this, and it would match it with a executive functioning skill right in the space. So rather than me working with 400 teachers going, oh, here's your answer, here's your answer, here's your answer, the space was able to automatically make those connections and find those patterns for who needed what resources. And so after I said that my son was stubborn, right, and it goes, oh, he's dealing with cognitive flexibility, it reframes it as that skill. It then gives the teachers 3 to 4 strategies, which is the next step in that Google coaching model of here are some, I'm going to research what are the strategies that I can use to support my problem. The space does that. So rather than teachers searching through 100 different slides for resources and links, the space caters to what they said, and it personalizes those strategies to that certain situation that they are struggling with in their classroom to help them overcome.
Yeah, I really like that because you're really tailoring that learning that's going to be taking place to what those individual needs of students are, and and the skills that are going to help them become successful learners. And I think that's a great step for teachers to be able to make. But do you think that's the entry point for most teachers, or do you think most teachers entry point to generative AI? Do they need a softer entry into that pool? Than starting to personalize for every student? Like, is it something like, maybe with helping them design or improve some lesson plans or tweaking assessments that they've given before they get to that point? Or do you think it's good to like jump into the pool with a cannonball in the deep end? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely think it depends on the personality that you're working with. But a lot of times, what I have noticed is teachers first need that productivity win, like, oh, I can differentiate in just a few moments. Oh, I can do this in just a few, seconds. Oh, I can find this resource and it can summarize or rewrite my email. I think they sometimes need that concrete example of how they can use it before kind of using it within their lesson. I mean, our students are using it regardless, right? Like our students are probably exploring AI on their own with their personal accounts, even if it's blocked on your district network. And so how do you then decide, okay, now I feel comfortable to dive in with the student side? But I've noticed that as I'm supporting teachers with AI implementation in districts, it really has been that productivity piece of like, let me get comfortable first. Okay, now that I kind of understand that this is like using patterns and how it kind of works and all of those things. Okay, now I'm ready to create that resource or that learning activity for my students.
So you've talked a lot about your space that you created in School AI. Why did you choose School AI as a platform when there's other educational AI alternatives that are available? What made that best suited to the situation that you described just a little bit earlier?
Yeah, I think it was the mission control. So being able to see that data, because in a coaching cycle, right, if I have 400 teachers, I don't want them being in a gym or another platform where I can't see what's happening. And so I was able to create that space and I'm able to see all of that data. I could add my principal or a co-teacher into that space and I can see all of that data appearing up in the screen. And I can say, okay, who's struggling? And I can even see like the lesson objectives that I have for this activity. And I'm also modeling for teachers. So I'm able to model to them, here's a technology tool that you can use with students as well. So they're able to kind of say, oh my gosh, I really liked how this kind of choose your own PD adventure worked out. And I love the strategies that it gave me. They're able to take that and share that with their students. But I was able to use that data piece. And so the next piece of the Google coaching model is first they identified. So they identified that executive functioning skill. We gave them strategies in the space. And so the AI can kind of help me with that, right? When I have 400 plus teachers, it can help me do that piece. Now, where I come in, because we still need the human in the loop, is where I come in is I can now support them with what they implemented, what they decided.
Mhm.
How do they need a co-teach? Do they need me to model? Do they need me to create a resource? Do they need me to send something? Maybe they're struggling with something in the curriculum and they need help with learning how to adapt it using AI. So I'm able to use that data piece, and then I'm able to dive in to support that coaching cycle with those teachers. And that's where the human piece comes in, is they choose, they have that ownership, that autonomy. And now that they've chose that strategy, okay, how can I go in and support them? I can see every single chat history. I can also see as a whole group, let me pull this and kind of see who maybe do I need to meet with? What professional development should I give whole group? I can use that data a lot faster to make decisions rather than everyone copying and pasting their chat to me.
I think you're dancing around a term here without using it when you talk about giving the learners choices in the modes and ways in which they're going to learn. And it's UDL, right? Universal Design for Learning.
Yeah.
And you've just been dancing around it here with everything that you've been describing here. But in my experience too, when I start talking UDL, or I think it's a barrier for some teachers too. How do you try to lower that wall and make it more attainable for teachers to really start to consider those different types of choices that learners needs, the needs of learners when designing their lessons, their assessments, in anything else?
Yeah, I think sometimes with UDL, it is that executive functioning piece that our students kind of struggle with, right? Because again, if I'm up in front of the room, I have control of my class, right? Like everyone's typically quiet. They might not be engaged, but they're quiet. And I think sometimes teachers think, or administrators, a quiet classroom, oh, they're learning, right? They're so engaged. It's like a library. And that's not always the case. I think sometimes messy, noisy rooms are learning, right? Because we're collaborating, we're talking, we're working with a peer. But we need sometimes those executive functioning skills to really be able to be active learners. And I think that was sometimes the missing piece that we noticed when we were trying to change from passive, right? Passive learners to those active learners. And so, for an example, I had a teacher that had a kind of a passive classroom where students were listening a lot to them lecture, right? Taking notes from the board. And so what this teacher was ready to do was they were willing to try station rotation. And so we tried station rotation, or they tried it the first time without any support. And I think that's sometimes how we learn, is by failing, right? And so they set it up like one station was the teacher, another station was like a video on Edpuzzle, another station was independent practice where the students were practicing like problem sets from Eureka. Another station was where students were supposed to be like working on some type of project in a collaborative group. Okay, the teacher station was good, right? The teacher was there monitoring it. The video station, well, if you switch a tab, the kids weren't on the video. They were on a game, right? Then you have the guided practice game where like they weren't completing all of their work. And then you had the last station where they were supposed to be working on a project and they were talking about their weekend plans. And so we really had to work through what are the pieces that we need to put in place to support that station rotation, right? Because just having it set up and saying go doesn't always work. And so we really had to teach the kids, here's how you watch a video. You put your headphones in, you hit play, you pause it, you take some notes. You hit play, you pause it, you take some notes, right? Like we really had to teach that skill. And so even though it was a 5-minute video, it should take you maybe 10 minutes total to watch it because you're pausing, you're making those connections, you're synthesizing the information, and you're taking those notes. And so he was adding those UDL principles in there by having, all of the video, listening, having that audio, by having that practice set where students were actually practicing that learning, working collaboratively, his station with that teacher's station. But there were just some different struggles, right? Because there were skills missing within that classroom. Maybe an agenda could support, right? A timer for time management, planning, and prioritizing. And so having those UDL practices are really important. But again, sometimes it feels out of control when we're trying to support that classroom.
Do you think, is there like a checklist or anything that a teacher should at least mentally go through to help make sure that they are designing with UDL in mind?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely could be a checklist. I've seen a couple, and also it kind of depends on the school district. Like some districts use different frameworks as well. Madeline Hunter is another one, And so
Mhm.
depending on what your district uses, I've even seen though more so principals have like walkthrough checklists. And I think maybe, yeah, we should be sharing those with the teacher so they know what is the principal actually looking for when they're coming in, and sharing and being transparent about that information, I think is super important.
So, Stephanie, as you kind of look at, we've touched quite a bit on like the individual classrooms, especially from the coaching component and working with teachers. As you look at like when you're, whether it's, your previous experiences at schools or with SchoolAI, how does it differ when you start to like have a whole room full of teachers with professional learning?
Yeah, so coaching is that like one-on-one small group coaching where you're working really intensely with a problem. Whole group is a little bit more crazy, right? Because you've got teachers with all levels, just like a classroom. And I think sometimes what I've noticed is my sessions at conferences are very interactive. I'm usually like not that sit and get type of person because I'm like, I hated that as a student. And so I make people get in. I've used edu protocols, I've used, different technology, school AI spaces during my sessions, station rotation. And one person was like, I just want to be a passive learner today. So I don't know if I should attend your session. And I'm like, oh, right? Like, oh, that kind of hurt. Like you want to check email and you want to do other things rather than like growing and learning in this experience. But with me, like you are going to be expected to do things in my session. And so I think it's kind of hard because I think sometimes teachers want to be passive, right? Like I want to be able to check my email. I want to be able to do certain things that I've always done for years. But we really do need to change professional development because we need to model what we expect to see in the classroom. And so if we expect to see sit, rows, passive learning, then yeah, that's what our professional development should look like. If we don't want that in our classrooms, then I really do think it needs to be active. It needs to be group work. It needs to be collaborative. It needs to have different elements of good teaching to support our learners and modeling that and taking those instructional strategies that they can take back into their classroom. So it really kind of depends on the district, but I feel like it is kind of hard, especially now that I work with so many different districts. I have to be like, okay, what is the culture? I don't always have that relationship with the teachers beforehand. And so it's just kind of like, okay, what is it that they need? How can I support them? And then how can I make this active and engaging for them? And again, it kind of depends. If they only buy one professional development, it's very difficult because I don't have that relationship over an hour, right? Compared to if they buy like a full day or multiple sessions, then I'm able to build that relationship and really dive in.
Yeah, and I that resonates with Jeremy and I a lot because in our position, we often are going into schools and we might only go in for a day and then we might not see that school again for a year. I mean, particularly like this is the case with all of the different AI trainings we've been doing, right? So we very much agree. Like it's difficult when you don't have like when you're not part of the culture, like you're not part of someone who's going around door to door and the staff get to know you and that kind of thing. Can make it a little bit difficult. one other question I have for you is like, when you look at, and I'll just keep it in the AI context, I guess, is that when you do go into a bigger room for a professional development, what do you think works the best for reaching a variety of different teachers? Like, so if we just keep it in the context of AI, we know that the way that elementary is going to be using it is completely different than what you might be doing at the middle school, high school level. And this happens a lot with other ed tech tools too, but just with AI, what are the best methods for a large group when you do have such a difference in not only their personal experience with AI and how comfortable they feel, but just an implementation of the variety of different classrooms that we have?
Yeah, because like with AI, for a lot of times, high school, they are like, okay, my kids can get on, they can do it, they can get a sense for this. Elementary, sometimes our students don't know how to spell, right? And so like that looks very different of using the voice to text or even the teacher modeling up on the screen first and then the kids diving in. And so a lot of times when I'm doing my professional development K-12 and I have all different teachers in the classroom and you've got regular ed teachers, you've got science, math, social studies, you have art, music, theater, right? You've got all of the different folks. Sometimes I do get lucky and they'll separate them out. But usually what I will do is I'll try to pick like a skill that is needed K-12. So sometimes I'm like, okay, writing, right? Like a lot of subjects need writing. So let's go ahead and show how AI can support the writing process. But it's also creating sometimes choice and naming. Okay, here's what this might look like for a kindergarten. But now let's talk about secondary, right? And sometimes depending on the time, if I can do breakout rooms and get them into grade bands and having them kind of collaborate too has been really helpful. But it depends on how much time is given, but it can also be helpful to just kind of name it like, okay, elementary folks, like here is how this can look. Here's secondary folks. And I'm kind of like, my experience is a lot more in that middle range. And so sometimes I'm like stuck, like, okay, I feel like I'm just kind of in that middle range and I really have to grow and think about, okay, how might an elementary teacher, like, what are you thinking? And using, I like to use Project Zero, which is from Harvard. They have really good reflective questions, and I'll use those with teachers. So I might even kind of say, okay, what do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? Right? Asking them, okay, have them share in the chat, have them share in the SchoolAI space. And as they're doing that, I can have them kind of gather that information and I can kind of collect and see and point out what they're sharing too. I also like to set timers. Again, my sessions are not passive. Okay, I'm going to model this. Now you go and you create. We're going to first start with productivity, just because, again, it depends on where the school is. If they've already had a session on maybe using AI with productivity, let's move into the student side of it. But I usually will show them, here's how we can differentiate. Here's how we can support another reading level. Here's how we can help with this. And then I move into, okay, this next side, we're going to learn how to create a learning experience and kind of thinking through the framework, right? Because I think sometimes with AI, teachers are like, well, when would I use this, right? And so thinking through our lesson, thinking through the parts of our learning, right? At the beginning, we try to hook our students with prior knowledge. Well, I can create a space that inspires, that sparks curiosity, that gets my students excited about a topic, builds vocabulary, builds prior knowledge. I can then move into like a formative assessment, right? That's usually the next part of learning. And so how would this look, kind of like substituting what they've done on paper into maybe using AI to support that instruction? And when I tell them too, and I have them think about, I usually have them in a SchoolAI space where I'm like, okay, think about how would this feel different if you did this on paper, right? Like think about your bell ringers. If you do this on a piece of paper, I have to go around as a teacher and push for deeper learning. Well, why did you say that? Why do you think that, right? Like if a kid just writes one sentence, the paper is not pushing back. It is not pushing back on their thinking. And so for me as a teacher, I would have to get 10,000 steps by period fourth, right? And I'm like, okay, keep going, keep going. But with the AI, it can really push their learning into deeper levels of thinking. And so we talk about that too, of like, paper's not bad, but when can I use this instead to support that deeper learning? And so just kind of giving them those examples, giving them time to fail forward and try things and break it, and I'm there to support them, is really helpful. And then again, it depends on the district. Where I struggle because I'm such a advocate for coaching is the schools that don't have a coach. And there's a lot of schools in Ohio right now that are cutting coaching. And I'm not okay with that, right? Like I am not okay with that, because sometimes I'll do like a coaches type of session, and then they go and train and work with their teachers, which I absolutely love and adore. But other times I'm like, okay, go try this in your classroom. Well, I'm up in Ohio. If I'm teaching a teacher in Kentucky, I can't just go to Kentucky and coach them, right? Like sometimes in Ohio I can, but if that district doesn't have coaches to help that teacher, I'm like, okay, well, who's going to be there to support them, right? And so trying to tie it back to maybe their teacher-based team. So if they don't have coaches, which again, I disagree with, but I get it, they have to work with their teacher-based team to have that kind of conversation and talk about how they're using that within their classroom. But that kind of skill. And so just taking those skills that they're already doing in their classroom that really support great teaching and helping teachers walk through and model that.
Yeah, and I want to pivot here just for a second, because you had brought up just the reality of not having available coaches or just an available support to learn how to implement edtech. So as you are looking at the current landscape, and I know you have your own organization for learning too, Gold EDU, but so with that, what are ways that some of those teachers can get into those learning opportunities, being that they don't have someone that's like directly at the district?
Yeah, there's a lot of different resources, I think, out there, right? If you get on social media, you can find a friend connecting at conferences and finding those people too. But I think where sometimes we get stuck in, I did my first couple years, is feeling like I was only able to collaborate with people in my district, right? And then I got accepted into the Google Innovator program, got sent to Sydney, Australia, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's all these educators out here outside of my little district. And so I was able to learn and make friendships and really start to reach out to people. So reach out to people. Educators are wonderful humans, and I think sometimes teachers feel stuck by those four walls or they're exhausted, but collaborating, having conversations and connecting. One of the ways that I do it now, because I work at home a lot of times, is I use Marco Polo. So Marco Polo is a video app where you video call somebody. They can't interrupt you. It's not like a phone call where they come in and out. Like I just talk for 20 minutes to some of those folks, or sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 2 minutes, sometimes it's, 3 minutes. And you can just really think through a problem that you're having, and you're able to kind of talk it through, and then that person listens and then they respond back to you. And so that is one way that I have really connected with a lot of educators right now, is through Marco Polo. And so I had maybe 6 messages today, and I'm like, okay, let me go through these. Some of them were 2 minutes, some of them were 10 minutes, and I'm just listening, right? And we're giving advice, we're solving problems, we're thinking through, how can we add some ideas into this lesson? How can we support this? And so I think there's no really excuse, right? For this, because again, this is asynchronous. I can respond in 2 days. I can respond in a minute. I can respond in 4 days, right? I can decide when I respond. There's also WhatsApp groups where teachers can collaborate and communicate. But I think sometimes you have to be the one that steps up first and say, hey, let's be friends. I'm dealing with this. Do you want to help me with it? I noticed some of the things that you're doing on social media, or, hey, I use this resource, really telling people hey, I used this and it was amazing. Thank you for creating that, because it took them time to create. Educators are some of the most giving people on this planet. I do know there are paid coaching services. So I know if you need paid, I'm sure there's something out there for you, but a lot of folks will just want to be your friend and help you.
That's one tool that I have not heard of before. So that
Marco
is
Polo?
now, I have not. So that I'm going to add that to my list of something I need to check out here.
Yeah,
I
we can be
have
friends.
a spreadsheet of, and I just call it things to check out. and every month I try to update it or try to pick an afternoon each month where I go through, and of all those things that I've accumulated, I try to check them off. So at least I'm familiar with them, or if I've got
Yeah.
something looks like something I need to share to a particular person or group because I know it's going to fit for them. That sounds like a great way to kind of to do some of those things and combine it, and also just kind of be that I just need someone to listen to me, kind of
Yeah.
thing where it happens all the time,
Yeah, if you need a friend, I'm on there, Jeremy. We can connect. I can listen to
Perfect.
your problems, you can listen to mine, and we can just give advice and it's like a coaching cycle because, like,
Yeah.
what's nice about it too is it's really reflective because you're not being interrupted, right? Like, you can record as long as you need to.
Hmm.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to make sure that we definitely get to here before we wrap up our time here together is a few years ago, I know you wrote a book, Controlling the Chaos, and you've talked a lot about executive functioning here on the program so far. But I kind of want to tie it back to that, to the book, and where you see how is that still applicable? Because I think was the book in about 2022 or so,
Yeah,
3, 4
yeah,
years ago,
yeah.
which is coming out kind of at the beginnings of generative AI. And now with AI, how is it kind of, you've talked about using AI for helping with executive functioning skills and identifying and designing for those. But if you were to write a second edition of the book, or you were to add a new chapter about AI, what would you include in that?
Yeah, so it does not have any AI. This is all prior to AI, or AI just getting up and running at
Yeah.
that time, or I mean, known about. I mean, AI has been around for a little bit. But with that book, I think one thing that I would have really changed is how we think about student feedback and ownership, right? Because I think AI can really play a role in that feedback piece. And that is something that, I mean, we talk about, but it's a lot of like the teacher supporting the feedback or peer support, where now we have AI that can really kind of be that first pass for students. Another thing that I love is like students with directions. Sometimes they will get multi-step directions, and you have kids that won't even start the project or the assignment because there's just so many directions where they don't even know where to start. And so what I've been working with some teachers on is kids like intervention specialists. They'll have a space and then the kids will paste in the direction so it can be reused and reused as many times as it needs to. They paste in the directions and it breaks it up. So it will break up the steps for the kids to help them with that project, to help them with that task, to help the intervention specialist if they're trying to help their students. And so that is like something else I think I would add in is just how AI can support different parts of executive functioning. Because again, it was a lot either teaching the kids how to do that their own selves or different ways like that. And so I'm excited to see where AI goes because I've been exploring
Mhm.
a lot with Claude too. And it was crazy. I put into Claude and I'm like, I'm using Cowork. And I go, here's my son's calendar for next school year, right? Planning and prioritizing. It put it all in my calendar. Like I no longer need to go in and create an event for each of those single events that are on that district calendar. I was just able to say to Claude, add this to my calendar and there's an event for it, right? And so
Mhm.
I think that is going to be, we're going to have a lot of those agent or co-work type of things available. I feel like right now the pricing is kind of keeping the availability and the privacy to schools and districts, but I'm wondering like what will AI look to support that executive functioning? I don't even want to say 5 years from now, like a year from now, right? Because it's just changing so quickly.
Yeah, it's so hard to predict exactly where things are going to go in that regard. But, like some of those skills, though, stay the same. Like you're talking about helping students set themselves up for success by finding ways to break large tasks down into smaller pieces, by helping to stay organized, by things like you said, setting yourself some time limits, as you progress through different things before you're moving on to something else. But I think those are all great ideas. And, if you ever do update your book, I think that's definitely something that would be included in that next one.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're kind of getting to the point here where we're getting a little bit short on time here. So we want to move quickly into our lightning round question. So we're going to let you expand on any of these questions that David and I have for you. It's a chance for us to get to know you a little bit better, but also to end on a little bit more lighthearted note rather than digging deep into the weeds, you know. So you know, in the interest of time here, you know, I'm going to limit you to how much you can expand, though. So be ready with quick, poignant answers. No, I'm just kidding. Take as much time as you need here. But so I'll kick off with the first one, and then we'll alternate a little bit here, and then David or I will give you some this or that questions where it is one or the other. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
So you talked a little bit about failing and learning from failing here. So I'm going to put you on the spot. What's one classroom or coaching idea or implementation that you tried that just failed but really taught you something important?
I used to just say, here's a cool tech tool. I would be the one that's like, here's 5 tools, go try them. And instead of focusing on that like Google coaching model of like, what's the problem? That's where I failed and really confused a lot of people or gave them too many tools in their toolbox.
All right, Stephanie, first job you ever had?
Babysitter. Or, I mean, I did get in trouble in 4th grade. I had a classroom store that I would put out during indoor recess, and people could buy things from me with their, like we had these like smiley bucks that they could pay me for my things. I got in a lot of trouble though, like a lot of trouble. And yeah, it was not encouraged, which is kind of sad because I'm like, I was running my own business in 4th grade. So babysitter for sure.
Yeah, just think if you would have had like Venmo.
I know. Could you imagine how much money I could have made from those 4th graders?
So what's your guilty pleasure TV show, movie, Netflix series, whatever that you binge?
A Full House.
Oh, interesting.
Nice. Love the 90s. What's something people would be surprised to know about you?
So when I went to Sunnyvale, it was like a Google symposium. I have touched all of the sands in the world.
Nice.
If David and I were to host a conference and we invited you to become our keynote speaker here, and the moment is coming where you're about to walk out in front of the audience on the stage and you want to be able to pump yourself up, what's your keynote walk-up song going to be?
I'm very competitive. And so I just won the Edu Protocols, March Madness event. And so I think it would be like, all I do is win because like, I'm very competitive and I'm like, okay, all we're going to do today is we're going to win.
All right. And we're going to hop into our this or that. So this one's a bit tougher. You can only choose one or the other. Although we have people say both all the time. So Google Doc or sticky notes?
Google Doc.
Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Cook at home or eat out?
Eat out.
Plan everything or improvise?
Plan.
AI for brainstorming or AI for feedback?
Brainstorming.
Quiet work time or collaborative chaos?
Quiet work time.
And the last one is beach or mountains?
Mountains.
All right.
Mountains are still winning. I don't know.
They should be, the beach is just too sandy. Like
Plus you touched
we have disagreements here between the two of us.
Oh, I've heard. Yeah, I've heard.
So Stephanie, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate having you on, and it's been a great conversation here. But as we come to a close, I want to kind of turn the mic over to you and give you a chance to promote anything that you have going on. Whether it's your website, whether it's anything SchoolAI or a conference maybe that you have coming up that you're going to be presenting at, and maybe how listeners can get in contact with you.
Yeah, so I'm working on a second book. So hopefully that will be out sometime soon. I don't know. We'll see. But I am working on just kind of how to re-innovate your learning. So like taking what you've done and kind of upping it up with technology or resources or strategies. I'll be at different conferences, so make sure you stop by, say hi as you're maybe at ISTE or any of the same events that I'm at. And then you can always connect or chat with me on Marco Polo. I'm always looking for new friends if you're interested in having those conversations. Or you can find me on social media at MissHow24.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to link all of those things into the description in the show notes. But just once again, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie.